Hey folks, this is Dr. Emily Scherning with AR. I'm here with an up-to-date climate outlook for all of our friends in Massachusetts. I gotta warn you, if you're near the coast, you're not gonna like this one. And if you're interested in being near the coast in this region, you might want to check out the Connecticut Outlook. That's sort of like the good parts version of Massachusetts. And it's worth noting that there are really good parts in the Massachusetts Outlook. Once we get inland, you'll see there's some excellent conservation. But before we get into it, I think it's important you be able to fact check me and do your own research. You can find all of the tools that I use in these outlooks under the resources tab. Just scroll down. You'll be able to find links to get to our original visualizations, to the NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer, and to the NCA5 report, which if you navigate that, you can go to the chapters tab to find all figures. And I call out figures before I use them in the report. Our visualizations are powered by the publicly available data sets in the NCA5, and a lot of our visualizations are set up where you can look at 1.5C, which is where we are now. The last time we had a global monthly average below 1.5C was June of 23. June of 24, we were also at 1.5C, and we should be getting the July figures in within the next couple of weeks. Frankly, it should be a real kick in the pants to us all that we're stuck at 1.5C now. It makes 2C not seem so far away. It used to be thought we'd hit 2C around 2050. Now it seems like that timeline's probably out the window. And there's big changes projected between 1.5 and 2C, as you'll be able to see side by side in the American Resiliency Visualization tool. We're living in a time where I think it's important to know if there are going to be emerging life-threatening risks in your area, and I hope that I can help to bring you that information. I want you to be able to confirm everything I report without too much work on your end using those resources. And you should know that we are using these federal resources because they represent the highest consensus climate science available. The NCA5, the Fifth National Climate Assessment, that represents the highest quality climate science available. We don't have similar quality of projections for most other countries. Your tax dollars paid for the development and review of this document, and you deserve access to the information in it. But as a matter of congressional mandate, there's no direct federal funding for communication to the public about the National Climate Assessment, which is why I founded American Resiliency. We're the only nonprofit focused on communicating this important information to the public, and we run on your donations. For Massachusetts, we're going to start with the coastline because, like with the New Jersey video, you got to see where retreat and retrenchment is warranted before we project conditions for land that's just not going to be there anymore, especially if we hit higher end sea level rise scenarios. If you love these places, I do want to warn you that this information is going to be hard to take. It's going to hurt to look at. It's okay to choose the right moment to try to take in this information. We're using the NOAA Sea Level Rise Viewer. This is a very powerful tool that gives address-specific information. So if you live anywhere near the coast, this is an important tool for you to be able to look and check right in on the places that you love. But we're going to do an overview starting with the islands. We're going to start with Martha's Vineyard. Modeling 3 feet of sea level rise, we can see a lot of marsh incursion coming from the south, and that at 10 feet, the coastline of the island changes a great deal. However, if we zoom in, it's worth noting that there's limited damage to the built environment on Martha's Vineyard. Unfortunately, that's in real contrast to Nantucket, where we see substantial marsh incursion all the way into the island, as well as pretty severe beach loss at 3 feet. And at 10 feet, real big changes to the margins. If we zoom in here, we can see that there is substantial inundation of the built environment, and we see these green marshy patches appearing well inland, which probably means that you're going to be talking about changes to the water table and potential saltwater incursion into your soil here. So very challenging and differentiated outcomes for Martha's Vineyard versus Nantucket. Working our way into the mainland with Cape Cod here. At 3 feet, we can see already substantial changes, particularly to outlying keys. And when I'm talking about this 3 feet rise scenario, that's sort of the higher end of our standard sea level rise scenarios for this part of the US. However, the news coming in from Antarctica has been really bad. It really means that we should be looking at higher end sea level rise scenarios, looking at 10 feet, where you can see all of Cape Cod at 10 feet is looking really quite erodible. Zooming in on Provincetown, we can see extreme marshiness, extreme land loss, We're talking about an area that is likely to be severely damaged by continuing storms. And for everyone who loves habitat, this outlook for the Cape Cod National Seashore really stinks. This is a lot of habitat loss we're looking at here. It's important to note that the outcomes are pretty variable along the coastline. When we model these around here near town of Dartmouth and New Bedford, we can see that there's pretty clear margins where you're going to experience land loss at 3 feet, and we don't see all of that inland marshy incursion, even at 10 feet, although you do lose more of the built environment. This is an example of a coastal area where digging in, building more resilience would be possible than what we looked at on Cape Cod. Providing some contrast, if you look at Marshfield, town of Marshfield here at 3 feet, enormous land loss. At 10 feet, the damage to the built environment is enormous. So if you're anywhere along here in the Massachusetts coast, you need to check out what's going on right in your area before you make the call if you're going to dig in or not. And we just can't talk about what Massachusetts is facing unless we look at these potential outcomes for Boston, which at 3 feet, at a level of sea level rise that everyone is pretty much in agreement that we need to brace up for, we can see the change to the water table around Boston looks really substantial with a big expansion of marshy areas inland. And if we go to 10 feet, we're going to lose a tremendous amount of the core and historic built environment and see marshiness begin to emerge very far inland. Much of the town of Belmont is going to start to experience substantial water table changes. In this figure right here, we're looking at billions of dollars of damage, both to homes and to the functional tax base and commercial engine of the state of Massachusetts. Up the coast, with few exceptions, we are looking at outcomes as bad as the developed area around Boston. If you look here centered on Ipswich at 3 feet, we see substantial land loss and substantial incursion, indicating water table changes. At 10 feet, it's only worse. And remember, 3 feet is pretty much where everyone agrees we need to be preparing, and 10 feet really is looking more and more likely by the month as we see the melt data that is coming in now from Antarctica. This is very serious outlook for coastal Massachusetts. So that really stinks. We're looking at major land loss in Massachusetts, and the combination of land subsidence and sea level rise that's occurring on this shallow coast over the continental shelf, it's a 1-2 punch that's going to hit many communities quite hard. Like in my video for New Jersey, I would be concerned about the impact of this damage on the state budget. I would be concerned about fiscal solvency for the state and the ability of the state to continue to provide normal services in the event of even that 3-foot sea level rise scenario. It's fair to say that this hurts a lot and is a lot to take in. So let's look at the good news as well for a second. We're going to start with figure 2.11, where we've got projected changes to hot and cold extremes at 2C of global warming. I think that you can see at a glance that Massachusetts looks to have very limited impact of the most serious public health concern that we expect to see as we move towards 2C, which is exposure to prolonged extreme heat. At a glance, you can see there's not going to be a substantial increase in the number of days over 95. In Massachusetts, we'll see most of the summer heat increase come in the form of additional nights over 70, that being focused in near Boston. And that would be like a 2-week increase in nights over 70, nights where people might want to keep the air conditioning on. We can see this limited heat risk expressed in another way with the AR wet bulb risk tool. You can see that as we move from 1.5C, where we are now, towards 2C, most of the counties in Massachusetts are not going to experience an increase in the risk of their potentially dangerous hot season, with the exception of the county including Cape Cod, which, as we have seen, has other problems. So while you're going to be feeling warmer in Massachusetts than you used to in these projections, it's worth noting that that increase doesn't look especially dangerous. And that's one of the most serious risk factors all around the country, is increased summer heat duration. Let's look at the winters now. Going back to figure 2.11 and looking at cold days, we do see intense cold loss near the coast in Massachusetts. This red is where you're expecting a month less of winter. but there's a lot of cold loss throughout the state. This orange color, it's about 3 weeks of cold loss throughout the state. So we're looking at a projected much shorter winter at 2C. We can look at the intensity of cold in that projected winter in figure 11.3, which lets us look at average winter lows in terms of plant hardiness zones. You can see this figure is really big. I'm going to move to a snip now, where we can do a side-by-side projection of Massachusetts with its historical plant hardiness zones up until about year 2000, and then this 2C projection, which you can see just at a glance is very different. No matter where you are in the state, you're looking at least a 10-degree increase in your winter lows. Most of the state is no longer going to expect to see winter lows below 0F that is. And that's going to trigger a landscape change. You're not going to get the same chilling temperatures that are important for many tree species. You're no longer going to have this classic four-season environment feeling with a snowy, distinctive New England winter. It's going to become a landscape, an environment perhaps more like Virginia was historically, even in Western Massachusetts. We're going to move into talking about precipitation changes now, starting with figure 210. And zooming in here at 2C, you can see that except for the very northwest corner of the state, you're looking at maybe a 5% rather than a 10% increase of precipitation, which I think is good news. In this region, we've been seeing a lot of very intense flooding, particularly near the top of that 10% band. We can hope that Massachusetts will be spared some of that. Let's get more information to try and get insight into the potential for deluge-type rains. We're going to move to figure 2.12. This figure lets us look at projected changes to precipitation extremes. And you can see at a glance that there are conserved signals, for example, in North Maine, where we expect pretty severe precipitation increases. If you were to zoom in here and look at Massachusetts in depth across these three figures, you would see some signals for intensifying deluge-type precipitation, but not particularly intense and not particularly conserved across figures. So that's some pretty good news. The biggest risks for deluge-type rain appear to be along the northeast coast of Massachusetts, which we also pinpointed as very vulnerable to sea level rise. I would be almost more concerned about the fact that there is a lot of heavy rain looking to fall upstream in New Hampshire along the Merrimack River. So if you're near that river, if you're in the Merrimack River watershed, I would recommend building resilience against riverine flooding downstream, not being as concerned about serious deluge type rain hitting you directly, but it hitting you indirectly through river impacts. In terms of other practical resilience suggestions, with the size of your winter change, Western Massachusetts is looking pretty good. We're not seeing any huge deformations of the precipitation cycle. We're not looking at big summer heat. We're looking at an increased growing season. We're looking at a winter lift that many people would find this emerging environment pleasant, and you'll be able to grow a ton of stuff in there. But I would be concerned about your current fruit and nut-bearing trees because your current mature trees might not get the chilling days they need to have good yields. I would think about switching out towards cultivars that have reduced chilling day needs. I'd also be concerned about traditional winter activities being able to continue, like sugaring, which can be really important to families, and I'd be concerned about the general health of your forests. So you're not in the modeled area, Massachusetts, for any of the fire danger that we're able to explore through figure 7.4. But I think that as we see this change come over the land, looking at the forest with an awareness for forest health and becoming more aware of the potential for wildfire, monitoring tree health, thinking about deadwood as a potential hazard, I think those things might be smart. So I don't want you to get all freaked out about wildfire as this super serious imminent danger, but I do hope that especially if you're in that nicely conserved area in Western Massachusetts, that you consider wildfire as a potential emerging downstream threat. So Massachusetts, this is a real good news, bad news situation. The sea level rise issues are pretty intense. Your other problems are not so bad. There are many states in your region that are looking at bigger total changes in terms of your summer and winter change, and or that are getting hit by a lot more deluge type rain. Western Massachusetts looks pretty strong here, looks very continually habitable. If we were to think of Connecticut and Western Massachusetts as a unit, we'd have a total powerhouse there. Western Massachusetts is looking pretty stable. Connecticut is looking pretty stable, including the coastline. There's a lot of good territory in Massachusetts, and there are a lot of smart people in the state. So the question to work is there a way to foster healthy, sustainable communities in Western Massachusetts? Well, you're going to need to engage in very serious coastal retreats, serious, crazy bad problems along much of the Massachusetts coast. This is a very difficult problem to work with limited resources. If you're in Western Massachusetts and you're going to focus on your community and your home, you're in a wonderful area to build resilience in place. Finding ways to advocate for local sovereignty so that you all can get on top of your zoning, allowing you to grow or not grow the way you want to grow is important, as is building a strong local food system. Those are powerful ways that you could build Western Massachusetts resilience for the changes that are coming. I'm wishing you all the best because there's a really good future to build here. Let's get ready. Folks, thanks for watching. I want to thank everyone in the AR community for your contributions. The community is the reason I can keep going. If you want to donate, there's a link on the About page of our YouTube channel or on the top bar of our website, www.americanresiliency.org. I'm very grateful to our donors, to our volunteers, to everyone spreading the word online, and especially to everyone doing the work on the ground. And I want you to know we are closing in on being able to do overview and destinations content. I don't want to give anyone bad advice. I got to get all the edges of this quilt locked before I can put anything to bed, but we're very close. Vermont and New Hampshire will be coming out next week. They're important pieces. And then we'll check in on West Virginia, also a potentially critical stronghold. Let's keep going. Talk with you again soon.